Welcome back to BYoungMinistry.com, to another blog and another podcast. Welcome to those who access the podcast through Rumble and YouTube. Today we continue our study in the book of Mark. We're in the 8th chapter, verses 10 through 13, which reads, "Then right away he got into a boat with his followers and went to the area of Dalmanutha. The Pharisees came to Jesus and began to ask him questions. Hoping to trap him, they asked Jesus for a miracle from God. Jesus sighed deeply and said, "Why do you people ask for a miracle as a sign? I tell you the truth, no sign will be given to you." Then Jesus left the Pharisees and went in the boat to the other side of the lake. That's Mark chapter 8, verses 10 through 13. Today we return to our study of Mark chapter 8, where the Lord Jesus has just fed some 4,000 people with 7 loaves of bread and a few small fish that his disciples had on hand. This miracle, the feeding of the 4,000, is the second largest miracle meal provided by the Lord Jesus recorded in the Gospels, second only to the feeding of the 5,000 plus in Mark chapter 6. Our passage for today begins with, "Then right away he got into a boat with his followers and went to the area of Dalmanutha." This is the only mention in the Bible of the seaside community of Dalmanutha. In Matthew's account of this, it says that they sailed to a place called Magdala, the place where Mary Magdalene hailed. Magdala is a small little town just north of Tiberias on the southwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Magdala is located near the ancient fishing village called Dalmanutha, which was a stone's throw away from Magdala. Years ago, when the Sea of Galilee was low, archaeologist Ken Dart discovered this little harbor town submerged under the water between Magdala and Capernaum, which turned out to be Dalmanutha. For many years, the skeptics undermined the Bible's veracity because there seemed to be no evidence that this little fishing village existed. That is, until it was uncovered by the archaeological dig. No archaeological finding has ever contradicted the claims of the Bible. That's an important fact, because down through the centuries, people have tried to undermine it, ridiculing certain aspects of it. But as time goes on and archaeology continues, we discover the Bible was true all along. In verse 11 of today's passage, we read, "The Pharisees came to Jesus and began to ask him questions. Hoping to trap him, they asked Jesus for a miracle from God." Since the attention of large crowds of people had been arrested by the miracles and the teachings of the Lord Jesus, and they were starting to follow him, and his popularity was growing, the religious leaders made yet another attempt to curtail the Lord Jesus. Out of sheer envy and jealousy in the name of religion, they tried to trap him by asking for a miracle from God. In verse 12 of today's passage, we read, "Jesus sighed deeply and said, 'Why do you people ask for a miracle as a sign? I tell you the truth, no sign will be given to you.'" In response to the request of the religious leaders, the Lord Jesus sighed deeply. Unlike his earlier sighs, this sigh was a deep sigh, which communicated a stronger emotion over the spiritual blindness of these so-called spiritual leaders. His grief was profound over the hard-heartedness of these men. Their obstinate unbelief in the face of massive evidence led them to willful ignorance. The typical word that Mark used throughout his gospel for miracles, he did not use here. He most often used the word from which we get our English word dynamic. But here, in today's passage, he used the word from which we get our English word sign. These religious leaders wanted God the Father to personally authenticate the Lord Jesus in front of them. They wanted a personal, heavenly manifestation from God the Father, giving the Lord Jesus the authority as their Messiah. They asked for this because in several Old Testament passages, they had been warned that even false prophets would be able to work miracles. In verse 13, we read, "Then Jesus left the Pharisees and went in the boat to the other side of the lake." When we compare today's passage with Matthew 16, the Lord Jesus said a few things that Mark chose not to include. In addition, the Lord Jesus said to these stubborn religious leaders, "You can tell the weather, but you can't discern the signs of the times." Then he went on to say, "You are a wicked and adulterous generation." Then the Lord Jesus reminded the religious leaders of the sign given through the Old Testament prophet Jonah. He said, "As Jonah was in the well for 3 days, I'm going to be in the ground for 3 days. That," he said, "will be the last sign that you will be given." And when that sign came, and the word got back to the religious leaders of Israel that he had risen from the dead, they called the soldiers in, the Roman soldiers, who were guarding the tomb, and bribed them to lie about the resurrection. When they totally rejected the light, they were permanently enveloped by the darkness. What a contrast we are given here between these Jewish religious leaders and the Gentile woman in the previous chapter. The Lord Jesus insulted both, but only the desperate woman chose not to play the victim card. In the end, what these religious leaders did was to close their hearts deliberately to the very one whom they said they worshiped. My friends, I trust this blog and this podcast are helpful to you in your walk with the Lord. If I can be of further assistance to you, shoot me an email at BYoungMinistry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.